As Canadians well understand, our government is in a minority in this Parliament, and this deal can only be ratified if it receives the support of members of Parliament on the other side of the House. I strongly believe, I am 100% confident, this is a deal worthy of that support, and that is the case that we will be making, our government will be making in this House and with Canadians.
Parliament has reopened for business. Today, MPs return to the House of Commons, and the federal government's first priority is ratifying the new NAFTA. Canada is the remaining holdout in the trilateral trade pact. The Liberals are urging opposition MPs to pass the bill swiftly. So will they? Kevin Lamoureux is the parliamentary secretary to the government House Leader. Randy Hoback is the Conservative critic for international trade. Simon-Pierre Savard-Tremblay is the international trade critic for the Bloc. And Peter Julian is the NDP's House Leader. All four of them join us from the foyer of the House of Commons. Hi there.
Hi. Hello.
Mr. Lamoureux, I'm going to start with you. The opposition is asking simply for more time to study this deal. In the United States, members of the House Ways and Means Committee got months to study the deal. Why does your government not want to afford parliamentarians in this country the same luxury?
I think we've had a fairly wide spectrum of discussions and debates virtually over the last 3 years that have ultimately come into an agreement, a very important agreement for all Canadians, no matter where you live in the country. And at the end of the day, you know, I think that we have put together a deal that really works for Canada and the middle class. You know, everyone will benefit by its passage. When you think in terms of the House of Commons and how we would like to see it passed, I think that we have individuals and caucuses that will in fact be supportive of it. I know the Conservatives have been very strong on trade policies, expanding trade.
But with respect, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Lamoureux, but doesn't, I mean, when you say there's been lots of discussion over the last 3 years, that's true. In the public sphere, there has been. But the text of the deal has not been studied at length in Parliament. Why should this deal be different than any other?
Well, because what we're seeing is that the information has been let out now, from what I understand. We had the motion tabled earlier today. There's going to be debriefings that are being provided to all members of Parliament and senators. They'll have the opportunity to go through it. Just recognizing the importance of this trade pact. And at the end of the day, let's see how we might be able to come together and do some good work, whether it's at the second reading, committee stage. I think it can be done in a fairly expedited way, but we'll make sure that it's done properly.
Mr. Hoback, the premiers all got together. They wrote a letter asking parliamentarians to fast-track this legislation, get it implemented quickly. Are they wrong?
No, I think we're hearing not only from the premiers, we're hearing from business associations, all sorts of different groups that are basically saying, you know, it's not a great deal, but plug your nose and get it done, because they want bankability and stability in the marketplace. They want to know that they've got a marketplace to sell into in the U.S. and Mexico, so they'd like to see that confidence in the agreement. But we have some concerns, and one of our concerns, when Kevin talks about us being involved, well, we had questions before Christmas. We had one briefing with the minister on the trade deal. We still haven't received answers from those questions. Now, we will have another briefing with the chief negotiator, Steve Burhill, tomorrow, so hopefully he'll come with the answers to those questions. But we also recognize that there's lots of industries and sectors that have been left out. And one of the biggest complaints of trade deals in the past is there are sectors and industries that are left out and just abandoned.
Like what in this trade deal?
Well, right now you can look at the Rust Belt states in the U.S. They were complaining at the start of this agreement that they were left out and they lost all these jobs to Mexico. If you look here in Canada, you can look at the aluminum sector, you can look at the forestry sector, you can look at the agriculture sector. There's different parts of those industries that have said they have some issues or concerns.
The Aluminum Association, though, for example, is saying support the deal. They want the deal to go ahead.
Well, again, the association,
they have concerns, you're right.
The association will say that, but if you talk to different plants and facilities, they'll actually come back and say, well, yeah, but we've got some limitations that were created by the deal. So all I want to know is what those are, and then I want to know what the Liberal game plan is to accommodate these groups as we move forward. So if you've got a situation where they're negatively impacted by this trade deal, instead of being left behind like they were in previous trade deals, what's your plan for them? How are you going to make them whole in light of this new agreement? That's all we want to look at in the committee, is just what we can do to mitigate any of the negative response of this deal that was negotiated by the Liberals that is relatively flawed.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, your leader last week said that he would try and delay the passage of this bill. Is that the position of your party?
Well, our position is that while at first we agree with other opposition parties on the fact that we need a real debate on the deal. But that being said, our position is clear. We are in favor of trade. We are in favor of those kind of, we are in favor of free trade also. But we can't, if the deal is bad, we'll vote against it. And that's clear.
So what makes a bad deal then?
This deal is completely abandoning the aluminium workers here in Quebec, while our aluminium here is one of the cleanest and the greenest in the world. We're in an era of climate change. We also have total interest to have cars with pieces of aluminium because they are lighter. And on all plan right now, China, who's using polluting aluminium, is now using Mexico to do some dumping. And that's why, because there is no rules of origin clause on the aluminium, while there is one on steel, we believe it's a really unjust deal. And that's why at the moment...
With respect, though, the head of the Aluminum Association, while acknowledging those concerns, says it's still more important to move ahead with the deal. The Premier of Quebec, François Legault, says adopt this, move it ahead quickly. Yes, those concerns exist, but they can be addressed a different way.
Yes, but the association is representing corporations. It is not representing workers. When we talk to trade unions, they're all saying the same things as us. They all have the same question and the same opposition as we have.
Mr. Julian, let me ask you, I know that the NDP has raised concerns throughout the process about the so-called progressive aspects of the deal and if they will go far enough. We know that through the U.S. process, the process south of the border, many of those concerns appear to be addressed, so much so that Richard Trumka endorsed the deal. Is there something that your party knows that he doesn't?
Well, first off, it's ironic that it's the Democrats in the U.S. Congress that actually have been the toughest negotiators to getting a better deal for people generally. Mr. Lamoureux just talked about the motion that was tabled today. It's over 100 pages, and every single page has impacts. So we are studying, as the worker bees in Parliament, we will be studying that 100-page motion, plus the legislation itself that we've asked for, so that we can really go through it in detail. And in that way, we can get a sense of the overall thrust of the agreement and whether the improvements that were fortunately made by the Democrats in the U.S. Congress actually on balance.
Your leader, though, Mr. Julian, Mr. Singh last week said that he had seen the text, that you've read through the text. So what do you have concern, like what are the specifics that you're concerned about right now after reading the text?
Well, as a number of my colleagues mentioned, the whole issue of steel versus aluminum treatment, the impacts on supply management, the impacts on public services of some of the new provisions in the agreement that weren't changed by the U.S. Congress. Those are all things that we believe need to be appropriately studied. The trade deals have implications. They have real consequences. So we need to make sure that parliamentarians get the appropriate witnesses to explain those impacts, and parliamentarians can then best judge on the impacts of the deal.
Mr. Lamoureux, were Canadian aluminum producers and workers kind of sacrificed in this process? And if they are, what is the government going to do to remedy that?
No, not at all. And this is where I'm actually encouraged in listening to my friends and colleagues from the Bloc, Conservative and NDP. They raise an issue in regards to the aluminum and the steel industry. And if you really take a look at it, how did NAFTA protect the aluminum industry? It did not. Within this new agreement, there's actually guarantees, 70% guarantees in terms 40%. Of content. And I think that the more that we get a better understanding, and this is something that Canadians want. They want to see opposition working with government and government working with opposition. It is a good agreement in that particular industry.
You don't see this as detrimental to the aluminum industry at all?
Not at all, because before there was no guarantees. Now we actually have guarantees, and that's why you get the support that's coming there.
But their concern is that it opens up competition to China, to Mexico, and you disagree with that assessment?
That's the reason why it's important. Let's get it through the second reading, get it into committees, and then if there's other people that want to have this discussion in regards to a industry or a specific, let's have that. I am absolutely confident that this is the type of an agreement that is far superior than the previous agreement, and it will allow for us to protect the economy, the jobs that are so critical.
Your colleagues do not seem convinced, Mr. Hoback.
We'll take a little time. We'll work on it together.
Yeah, again, it comes back to, I don't think this is a good agreement compared to what we've had in the past. Now, there's been some movements forward in maybe certain chapters in the environmental chapter and things like that. But reality is, this Liberal government hasn't realized that they're in a minority situation. If they would have been consulting with us in December, in November, as they were making changes to the agreement in the very end, I think they could have had a faster movement through the House of Commons and through the committee with this agreement, which is what a lot of the business community and the premiers want.
Is your party going to support this, Mr. Hoback, though?
You know, at the end of the day, we'll decide what we're going to do and not do, but we are the party of free trade. So, you know, when we listen to the premiers, we listen to the business community, they're giving us a clear direction in which way they want us to go.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, let me get you to respond to Mr. Lamoureux's comment that this is not going to be detrimental at all to aluminum workers.
The protection, the 70% protection, is on the pieces of aluminum pieces. It's not on aluminum itself, and that's really different. What's unacceptable in it is that steel has a complete protection. Steel is looking at the origin of the steel, but not aluminum. It is really unjust, and for that we believe that once again Quebec industry is sacrificed when it's time to negotiate deals.
Mr. Julian, last word to you.
Well, what we really need is a new process around trade agreements. These are negotiated in secret. The government is trying to push things through rather than allow for a real sense of what Canada gains and what Canada loses through this process. And the 100 pages that were tabled today, I just think in a minority parliament situation doesn't show the real respect. The government should have given us heads up a couple of weeks ago. They had time over Christmas to let all parliamentarians study that even prior to us coming back. This is the kind of thing that I think the government needs to take a real look at. In a minority parliament context, they need to be much more transparent, and I believe firmly that our trade process has to be a lot more transparent so Canadians understand what's involved.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much to all four of you for your time. Thanks to Kevin Lamoureux, Randy Hoback, Simon-Pierre Savard-Tremblay, and Peter Julian. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.